The images that we're seeing are becoming more and more shocking, with the visuals of starving children populating our television screens and our news feeds. But how important is it that we see these images coming out of the besieged enclave and war photography in general? We're joined by Lynsey Addario, award-winning photojournalist and author of the memoir It's What I Do. She's been to many conflict zones across the world since 9/11. Lynsey, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I suppose people like you just simply cannot get access to Gaza, so we are depending on, if you like, indigenous journalists there and even citizen journalist photography for the images we're seeing.
Yeah, correct. This is one of the first times or one of a handful of times in history where there has been a total media blackout for foreign media entering Gaza or any democratic place. I mean, I think, Israel has banned all journalists from entering, all international press. And so it's incredibly frustrating to not be able to report on what's happening there. And we are totally dependent on Palestinian journalists who have done a heroic job of documenting not only the attacks against, the people around them, but their own relatives being killed, their own colleagues being killed. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, 186 journalists and media workers have been killed across Gaza, the West Bank, Israel, and Lebanon, but 178 of them are Palestinian. And so that's just extraordinary.
The difficulty then is if no international independent journalists are allowed in, and what we get is the work of Palestinian photojournalists and indeed from ordinary Palestinians who are chronicling the death of their loved ones, the destruction of their homes. And we take this as being an accurate chronicle of what's going on. The Israelis immediately say, you're believing Hamas propaganda. You're becoming dupes of Hamas.
Well, I mean, the quick answer is, well, then let in the international media, obviously. I mean, the question is, why have they not allowed international media in? What are they trying to hide? I think the second answer is, it is clear that, first of all, many of the journalists who have been working and providing us with these images are journalists who have been career journalists and documenting events for years. And they themselves, AFP, the Agence France Press, have put out a statement the other day saying their own journalists are starving to death. They are scared that their own journalists will not be able to continue working. And so I think a lot of these are reputable journalists. And if it is citizen journalists, people taking photographs around them, the reality is this is also very important because they are documenting starvation. They are documenting attacks. They are not doctored images. So I think at this point, this is what we have.
And we know that at the time of the October the 7th atrocity as orchestrated by Hamas, that we saw all the imagery of the Israelis who had been taken. Some of them we saw refugees abductees being removed by the militants. We saw all of that, and that was, I suppose, necessary and important that we see what had been done to Israel.
Exactly.
But then on the other hand, we cannot see the other side of what Israel is doing to Gaza.
Exactly. Those images from October 7th were incredibly important in documenting the atrocities against Israelis. And so the fact is that photography and war photography and documentation of war crimes and documentation of what is happening to civilians is important on both sides. It doesn't matter. We need these images. We need them as proof. We need them as testimony. We need them to stop the war and to create a ceasefire, because it is not acceptable under any conditions that there's mass starvation, man-made mass starvation going on in a place where there's food on the other side of the border. This is not acceptable. And so, I think that images can help convey the devastation. They can help convey the humanitarian situation. But how long can this go on?
We know that public opinion and indeed policy can be informed and changed by photographic imagery. I mean, you will remember that iconic image from the Vietnam War of the little naked girl running away from an
Of course.
explosion. Now, that girl became a woman and survived, which is, I suppose, the positive story out of it. But it certainly changed American opinion as to the conduct of that war.
Yeah, it changed American opinion, and I'm not sure where we are at in history that we have been witnessing the devastation and the mass sort of killing of people in Gaza for 22 months now, and there's no ceasefire. I don't know what that means. Are we inured to images of death and destruction because we see it in real time? We see it daily, whether it's from Gaza, whether it's from Ukraine. I've been working for the past 3 years in Ukraine. And, I just think, what does it take to move a human being into action at this point? We see them on our phones, we see them on our computers, on TV. I think that in one sense, we've become sort of anesthetized to them, and it's a very dangerous place to be.
Again, in recent days, we've been celebrating the anniversary of Live Aid, which was prompted by the Ethiopian famine. And we can all remember, those of us who live long enough, can remember those images of the starving children, which moved the world to do something about it. Now, you can argue over the effects of it long term on life in Ethiopia, but the point is that the world felt moved to do something about it. And yet the
Absolutely.
world seems powerless to do something about what's happening to the children of Gaza.
Yeah, it's something that sort of plagues me as a war photographer, as someone who has dedicated my entire adult life to covering humanitarian issues and conflict and human rights abuses, that I'm sitting outside watching this happen without any tools to be able to go in and document this. And I think, it's horrific, the images we're seeing. And people can tell themselves whatever they need to tell themselves to get to turn a blind eye. They can say, well, the people taking these photos are sympathetic to Hamas. Well, what does it matter? These are women and children dying of starvation in 2025. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who took the photo in this scenario, because journalists are not allowed in. So someone has to take these images. And the fact is, the world needs to react at this point.
It's extraordinary that you can have an image, for example, of a dog being saved during the Texas floods, and that gets more traction than a child dying in Gaza.
Yeah, because it's easier to stomach. I mean, at the end of the day, people do not want to rise to the occasion because everyone has their own issues and everyone has their own problems. But it is not, it will be it will be incredibly devastating to look back 50 years from now, 20 years from now, 1 year from now, and say, we allowed this to happen. We watched. Where are the people in positions of power right now? Where is Donald Trump? It's where are the people who can stop this, who have the tools to stop it? As an American, it is my tax dollars. It is Americans are supporting Israel to do what they're doing. And I want access to be able to cover this war because it's my tax dollars. So, if nothing else, allow me as a journalist to go in and document what's happening, because I think the world needs to see. And I also think that world leaders need to step up now.